everybody. You just heard Shannon talk a lot about the impact of COVID-19 on college finances, kind of along the timeline. Really, if you are just turning in now, for whatever reason you missed that segment, you want to go back and listen to it. Very valuable. But in this segment, she's just going to throw questions at me. Some might be COVID-19 related, some might not be, but that's what we're going to do today because all the rules are out the window. I'm eating all the carbs all the time. You'll just ask me questions, and that's what we're going to go with today.
Perfect. Sounds
All right.
great. And this first one does happen to be COVID related. So this came in from Christy through our Facebook page. So just a reminder to folks, if they do have questions, they can send us a private message on Facebook and we can answer them here on the podcast. And that is what Christy did. But Christy asks, what if a student was prepping for the March SAT and was ready to go? Our daughter has studied quite a bit, had a full study program for 4 months, done multiple practice tests. I can't imagine her keeping up her test prep pace until June, especially when it's possible that that will also be canceled. Her school is doing online school as well. She's got solid work to do from 9 to 4. So this is not how she's looking to spend her days right now. I think they will be out for the rest of the year and expect that this rigor will continue through May. When should she pick up SAT studying again? Or should she wait until the College Board announces that the test is actually happening? Should she start up again in early May just in case? Or should she be doing a few practice sessions each week just to keep fresh? Is that a lot of detail again, but kids prepping for the SAT, what should they be doing?
It's really good questions. I think a big thing is that if everyone is following the news, there are a lot of schools that are announcing test optional policies, some in general, but many for just a 1-year period of time. So for this group of juniors. And so that should hopefully alleviate some anxiety. Now, not all schools have announced that. So these are still theoretically going to be an important part of the process next year. I think the more test dates that get canceled, the less of a priority it's going to be. What I would say is, since she's already done a pretty intensive prep program, I would probably check in with whomever she was working with to say, are there any specific areas, types of problems that she struggles with, and maybe just focus on spending a little time, every day, once a week, whatever the schedule works with her schedule, to really master those particular problems. I agree that I don't think a flat out full scale test prep program makes sense right now, given that it is certainly very possible that the June tests will end up being canceled as well. I think keep your eyes open for future test dates, sign up for those as they become available, and just keep on keeping on, kind of. So my hope is that tests will be canceled with a lot of notice, but then again, the College Board still held the March test and basically said, not our call. Whoever decides to offer the test, they're going to offer the test. So I'm not sure their leadership has been particularly great here. In fact, I'm sure that it hasn't been particularly great here. So I think just kind of pay attention to what's going on in the world. If you're hearing that bans are being extended, that social gatherings of larger than 5 or 10 or whatever are being discouraged, then of course that means the likelihood that the June test is going to happen, if you're still hearing that in late May, is a lot less, right? So I wish I had a hard and fast answer here, but I do think that pulling back on the test prep and then ratcheting back up again when we get closer to a test date that looks more likely to happen is probably the way to go. I also think if you have access to practice tests and you want to do one of those a month or one every couple of weeks to kind of stay fresh, that's probably not a bad thing either. Malcolm Gladwell, it's 10,000 hours and you're going to be an expert. So, if she has a little bit of time to continue up with it a little bit, I think that's a good idea.
And the next question came in from Kim, and Kim says, my son, a junior, used to want to be a computer science major. Now he wants to be a computer engineer slash electrical engineer, yet all of his experience is in programming. Even on the robotics team, he is a programmer. Given the difficulty of switching into computer science or engineering once a student is accepted, what is a good way for my child to really investigate or examine now which major is the best fit? And I
Right.
believe it was last week we did a segment on the computer science major. So Kim, if you haven't listened to that one, you probably want to go back.
Yeah, I would suggest going back and listening to that. And then the other thing I would say is, um, if his general area of interest is in engineering, most engineering programs are not going to require you to select the exact area that you're going to focus on when you apply to engineering. They want you to apply to engineering, but then you can kind of decide what you want to do when you get there. So, exploration is part of college, and I would say that that's a one good way is actually get to college and explore it there. If he's trying to decide between whether he wants to apply to computer science or engineering, and at some schools, computer science is going to be within engineering, at other schools, it's going to be separate. One thing that he could take advantage of right now is that edX and Coursera have courses available, many of them free, where you could maybe take a class in one of these areas and use it as a way to explore these different the different sort of specialties and see. And also I would encourage, looking at the colleges. So certainly there's no substitute for maybe taking a class and seeing what you think about it. But in addition to that, maybe look at the college's websites and see, the schools of interest. Is computer science part of engineering? Is it separate? What do the classes look like in those different areas? What looks interesting? How difficult is it to switch your concentration within engineering? So again, you don't necessarily need to go in as an electrical engineer. It probably can be something that you can do, a choice you can make once you get there. And so, just looking at the different policies around that and understanding that most teenagers don't know what they want to study, let alone a specific segment of a general topic that interests them. The only other thing I would say is that computer science is becoming more and more selective. If he really wants computer science, you want to shoot for it. But if he's ambivalent or kind of deciding that maybe computer science itself is not for him, I would say really focus on what the options are in engineering, and that's might be an easier route into the college anyway. So,
Gotcha.
but yeah, go back and listen to last week's segment too on computer science. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. The next question comes in from Leslie, and Leslie says, being in California, our high school sends students a lot of confusing messages for grades and getting into college. They constantly hear that an A and an A minus is the same for California schools, but that's just the UCs, I think, in parentheses, or that only grades received in grades 10 and 11 count. But then your kid becomes a senior and suddenly doesn't want to go to a California school anymore, or they can't get in, and now they feel like they're in trouble because they let their freshman year grades go because they didn't think they counted. So basically the question is what to do if you are in California, you're thinking about the UCs, and they have such specific and different application requirements than other schools.
Right. Yeah, I think that is a big challenge with California. And, one of the things that I would say, and it's tough because if you haven't really been thinking about it and you're just now realizing, oh, wow, ninth grade basically matters everywhere else other than here. It's tricky. So I guess what I would say is to those underclassmen, those families who are in California just now listening, the reality is that you do want to have as many options available as possible. And California has an amazing public university system. They have the UCs, they have the Cal States. They do have a lot of options. And so you should still have a lot of options in California, but they not be the options that you want, right? So if you had
Yeah.
your heart set on Berkeley and you're the kind of student who's going to be competitive at Berkeley, I don't know that a Cal State is necessarily going to satisfy, even though there are a lot of Cal States where you could get a great education, and some might argue you get a better education than at Berkeley. That's a
Right.
conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So the only real advice I have here is that ninth grade does count everywhere except for the UCs. And I would really go through high school with an eye towards satisfying the UC requirements, or making sure that you're satisfying the UC requirements, but really with more of an understanding that at all other colleges in this country, they want to see you satisfying your high school's graduation requirements, ideally going above and beyond. So sticking with all 5 major subjects, math, science, English, history, and foreign language, all 4 years, and doing well, ideally all 4 years. So ideally, not having a terrible ninth grade and then suddenly having a really great 10th grade. Although, hey, if that happens, it happens. You're on an upward trajectory. That's great. The UCs certainly don't value a downward trajectory. So even if ninth grade wasn't as good as it could have been, yes, that does mean that there are some schools that will not be possible because of that. Anytime you look at the most selective level, they are looking for students to be competitive all 4 years and very strong
Right.
all 4 years.
Yeah.
So my advice, and it's really a tricky thing, like I said, if you're not listening to this until your student is a junior or a senior, it's kind of too late. But you really do want to, wherever you are, you want to approach this process holistically. Yeah, it might be your fondest wish that your child go to the local state school. And so all you're really looking at is what do they care about? But if you suspect it varies in any way from what other colleges might be looking at, you want to look a little bit broader and make sure that you are guiding them effectively. And let the college counselor know, hey, the goal is maybe local, but maybe to go farther afield so that they can help counsel accordingly as well.
Absolutely. And we received a question from Kimmy about gap years. So she says, I'm wondering if you have any advice into a gap year that doesn't involve spending money on a program abroad. And frankly, a lot of those have been canceled
Yes.
anyway. She says, my son is interested in taking 1 or more years to participate in his club sport and work to save money, which I'm all for, but what other factors should be considered? Maybe taking a math class at a community college to keep his skills sharp, maybe. The gap year programs we talked about on a previous show all sounded fantastic, but maybe counterproductive to having to pay for his college because
Sure.
they were expensive. What are some other gap year options?
Sure. Well, I think the very primary gap year option that people have been doing since the beginning of time, work. And that is my best advice. The gap year, if the student has applied to college and gotten in and they're just deferring their admission in order to have time to pay for college, then really all they need to do at this point is ask for a deferral and let the college know, I'm going to be working to save money to help pay for college. You don't need to do anything fancy. Working is just fine. And so while all the other stuff sounds really cool and groovy, I think there's no harm with a job. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to pop my glasses back on here. Next week, Ian is hosting. We're talking about making the final decision. What if you don't like any of your options? Yikes. Finding the best financial fit, because those are all very important. I'm on Instagram, College Coaches on Instagram. Follow us. And don't forget, we are here every week at 1 p.m. Pacific and 4 p.m. Eastern.
All right. Great show today, Beth. All clear.